bids, and that's.
Well, that's what we want to make sure, that everybody's treated the same regardless of the type of operation you may have that's otherwise provided for in the rules or has been provided for by the airport in the past. We want to make sure the airport's protected, but also we're treating people fairly across the board.
And you're required to do so.
Any questions? Okay. Construction clearing, okay.
Start that again, Jason, Jim, thank you. Can you all see this? Would you like me to turn off, lower the lights on this thing? Okay, okay.
I think so.
Okay, after talking with Carl, and he felt like that if we could create a visual to help the board better understand what it is that we're looking at. Worked with Katie Doherty at GIS, and she did a wonderful job creating this, incorporating all of the different PIN numbers and parcels in so that it can clearly be observed what it is that we're discussing. I'll let Jimmy Luther kind of give you an idea of what the different colors are. You see it in the legend, but he can explain to you how those corridors relate.
Thank you, Jason. Excuse my voice, I've been a little under the weather, so I'm a little gruff. But what's shown up here are basically three surfaces called the obstacle clearing surface, which there are two of those, one in purple, one in green. And then the blue is called the glide path. It's called the glide path object, GQS, the glide path cleared surface. These are all based off of the runway end that sits down here, and they're a certain width. They each start at the same distance other than the GQS. It starts actually at the physical end of the runway pavement. The others start 200 feet out from the runway pavement end. The purple limits that are indicated here are in accordance with your current height zoning ordinance, and that's a 1,000-foot width. It's 500 feet left and right of the center line of the runway. The green is a 20-to-1 obstacle clearing surface, which used to be what the Division of Aviation FAA called the Type 4 obstacle clearance area, and it's 400 feet wide, 200 feet left and right of the center line. The GQS is something that falls in between those two, and it's more related to the approach procedure development that comes with FAA's publication of approach procedures for pilots to view to the end of the runway. And it's a narrower, it really doesn't fit any of the particular TERPs or FAA Part 77 items that these other two fall in between. It's just a calculated area, if you will, that is required to be clear of obstructions to allow vertical minimums to the end of the runway. And without getting into a lot of detail here, I know it might be a little over your heads there as far as the detail, but anyway, what we're trying to depict here are three areas that are necessarily required to be cleared of obstructions off of the end of the runway. Now, the terrain is going to dictate what obstructions really are out there, because as the ground falls off, these surface planes continue up at an angle at 34-to-1 and 20-to-1. So for every 1 foot out it rises, or every 34 feet out it rises a foot, or every 20 feet out it rises a foot. So you're looking at an inclined surface that extends out to 10,000 feet off at the end of the runway. And at the very end of that 10,000 feet, you have what's called the outer width, which is the limits of the purple and the limits of the green, and then also the limits of the GQS area. You typically don't have obstructions out in that area unless they're a mountaintop or something of that nature, because the ground and the height of that surface when you get to that limit is so high above existing ground, you really have to have a very tall structure or terrain that would be a hindrance to the airport. You're really more concerned close in, which or where we've had issues in the past and currently have some issues with some 20-to-1 obstructions in this area in the green, as well as in your height zoning ordinance, which is in the purple out here, and they're mostly trees. That's really what the effect of it is. There's no terrain issues, no structures as far as homes or things of that nature, but they're all pretty much trees that have been identified by the FAA as being an obstruction to the glide path to the end of the runway. And we are undertaking a project to clear obstructions within this green area as phase one. It's kind of on hold now because DOA is reviewing some of the work authorizations, so, and they're combining two of your grants into one, taking the balance of the money out of those two and placing it in one, which would be for obstruction clearing only. But what the county is gonna have to decide on at some point in the future is when you're going to tackle what's in the purple areas here, if you will, the ultimate clearing limit. We're trying to get what's in the green and what's in the blue now so we can proceed, or FAA can proceed with issuing a procedure to the end of the runway that hasn't been there before for pilots to use.
And Jimmy, am I correct in saying that the purple area is what's designated in our local height zoning ordinance? So the reason that the purple is denoted there is that's currently what is required by our local ordinance to be cleared. And
that elevation is lower to the ground. The 34-to-1 is a lower elevation than the 20-to-1. So it encompasses more obstructions, if you will, and a larger area. That's 1,000 foot wide. Currently, the FAA is looking at an area that falls in between both of those. It's 800 foot wide, 400 feet from center line to center line. It will be right in the middle of the purple area, but it's a 20-to-1, so you can envision that green line moving out to kind of midway between the two purple scenarios.
The good news is the expanded new FAA rule that we're expecting, where our ordinance already covers us. We don't have to amend the ordinance to meet the new FAA guidelines or requirements.
That's our understanding, that's correct.
What's the crosshatch area?
I'll let Jason speak to that since he had it developed. I don't think he's showing some easements again.
right, originally, when this project was undertaken in roughly 2006, I guess, Ms. Miller's office did some title work and searched for easements that existed for clearing those areas. Well, in 2006, that original project only involved the narrow blue corridor that you see. So her title work mainly focused on properties that would be affected by that narrow blue corridor. But those two crosshatched parcels do have existing easements that were purchased from the property owners at the time that give us the clearing rights as an easement for that. She's
Developed on the airport was first developed, I think, back in the late 70s.
yeah,
early 80s.
late 70s, early 80s is when those were purchased and recorded. She's now indicated that because we're looking at a wider margin, a wider corridor that has to be cleared, she's in the process now of doing additional title work to see and determine if there are other easements that exist on some of the adjacent parcels. So, but as of right now, when this map was created, those two, the larger parcel that you see was actually at the time two separate parcels, and there were two separate easements. That property has sent, it was the same owner, two parcels, same owner. That property has recently been recombined into one parcel. That's why it's denoted here as one. But there are.
Use your laser pointers.
Yeah, this large parcel here originally was two separate parcels that was owned by Roger Smith, and those properties now, one of them was just kind of a triangular shaped piece right here, and the rest was all that you see. You can see where it's set in timber. That's forestry that's planted, but he's recombined those into one parcel.
One of the, really, and so I guess, Mr. Chairman, that part of the issue we wanted to get you a date on is where we are with this. It's going to be a pretty big project continuing forward. We need to get as many easements as we can, working with the property owners. There's issues with the easements that, Commissioner Richard has brought out, and we appreciate him. Really can't thank him enough for the hours he's spent going through some of these documents and raising issues. And we're just trying to to work through all this. If I may go, he has a suggestion, which, you know, I would just raise that as we get moving forward on this, we hold a property owners meeting, the affected property owners, and just tell them what's going on, and let them know what's happening, why we're doing what we're doing. Give them, you know, we have an updated easement version that the attorney's already developed, and give that to them and let them know what we're working on, and make sure they know what their options are too. And so we'll probably be moving forward with that at some point in the next several months. And so that's kind of where we are with this. We do have a letter that was sent to the board from Roger Smith. You know, we've made that a subset of this item because it directly relates to it. And is there any, Mr. Chairman, I would ask that he just ask for the, to the public or whatever, if there's anyone here to represent Mr. Smith tonight.
Is there anyone here to speak from Mr. Smith, or is Mr. Smith here to discuss the letter?
Mr. Chairman, in that regard, I asked Jason to walk me through it because it's a rather, the letter is a little complex to go through and the attachments aren't real clear. And Jason, if you would spend a moment kind of reviewing the board, really the summary you gave me was
Sure,
excellent.
yeah, I'll be glad to do that. I met with Mr. Smith on his property. He does not reside here, he lives in Tennessee, but he comes down frequently. And I met with him on his property, which is the property in question that has all of the set timber, the forestry timber. And met with he and his forester. He has a person that manages that timber. And just kind of wanted to show him what we were looking at. I gave him a copy of a parcel that was just printed off of GIS, and we looked at that. What he communicated to me was that, and his forester confirmed that when he was there, his timber is within 5 years of harvest. He is, maybe even as we speak, but he is soon to do a thinning cut, which he's going to remove a percentage of those trees to give the rest of the trees room to do their final growing. And he assumes that within 5 years he will be at that final growth. What he asked from me to convey to you is that when the bid package goes out for this total clearing, that his property, that he be allowed to cut his own, or his forester be allowed to cut his own, that his timber be exempted from the bid project that goes out. He understands that there's an easement on his property. He wants to be cooperative. He has no problem with that. He asked those two things, that he allowed to cut his own timber, and that that he's given a fair amount of time to do that, so that he is, if you will, one of the last to cut, or he just wants to buy as much growth time as he can on the timber that's going to be affected. And you can look here and see that we're talking about, if we're cutting out to the edge of what the current airport height ordinance is, you know, we're roughly 50% of his crop. And so if we go in and cut now, let's say that he went in and cut now, and then this project takes another year to 18 months, then he's lost that amount of growing time on his crop. So I think that through his letter, that's what he was trying to communicate, as well as trying to communicate the importance of his property and the family history that went into how that property came to be in his family through a land grant and things. But essentially the two things he wanted was to cut his own timber, to capitalize on his own money from that timber, and that he be given as much time as possible before he has to make that cut.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, Luther mentioned something in his presentation that didn't really relate to, but it relates directly to this, and that's the issue of work authorization. What the Division of Aviation is doing right now is they're combining two existing grants and closing those out, and they're going to create a third one with the residual money that will be allowed to be used as a work authorization. We'll get the work authorization to pay for this clearance work, the obstruction clearance work. And so you may have heard Jimmy mention that the reason that's important is when Jason talks is going to take a year to 18 months, we don't know how long it's going to take the Division of Aviation to give us the work authorization into the new grant. It could come next week, it could come 6 months from now. But when that comes, we will then go out to bid, and that'll start that clock ticking. And then what we would do is, at a staff level, is we would contact Mr. Smith, let him know that time frame, so that he can either have those obstructions removed himself or get it cleared, or we'll do it as an alternate A or something and do it as a part of the grant package, okay? Just so you